seen things you people wouldn't believe.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Brian at Whisper Status 74. Welcome to the community. Welcome to the channel. If this is the first time you're seeing me, please consider liking and subscribing. We are a very small tech community, real tech for real people. We cover everything tech, video games, movies, everything you can imagine that falls in that category. Today, we're going to be talking about movies. Now, I've done 4K Blu-ray reviews. I've done some retrospectives and what movies I want in 4K. What we're going to be doing today is combining all of that. We're going to be covering movies that I absolutely love, starting with Armageddon, released in 1998. The reason why I want to cover these into a deep dive right now, especially since these are movies that have been out for a long time, is many of us are home. And even though I do cover a lot of new products, like you, like myself, many of us have been absolutely crushed financially. As far as losing their jobs, people taking huge pay cuts, and even canceling purchases. My purchase of a new display was canceled last week. Had to finally cancel it. It was irresponsible for me in regards to my family to make a purchase that size. And many of you are having to do the same. Lots of you are still making purchases, which is totally fine, but I don't want you guys to feel you have to make a purchase or you can no longer watch this channel because all we're talking about is new tech that none of us can afford. So what am I? I am you. This channel is very small. I am not some huge YouTuber. I am not wealthy. I'm just like you guys. And I want to always be part of that, as that is exactly what I am. I'm in the house just like you. And speaking on that, I had hurt my back recently and I was on the couch icing it up. And it really does make you appreciate the technology you already have. Forget about your 4K displays, but watching a projector, watching my plasma, my Panasonic plasma for all of you that love plasma, and I was watching Armageddon. Now, again, all these videos won't have this big intro. This video will be rather long. I can't show you any parts of the movie. I will be putting stickers of the film and some of the information up on the screen because copyright is brutal for YouTubers my size. Armageddon. So I'm laying there icing my back because I'm getting old, trying to stay fit at home unsuccessfully, and I'm watching Armageddon. Now, Armageddon has a very special place in my heart. Films in general, to me and to many of you, are basically music. And nostalgia is a dangerous thing. It can make you see things better than they were. A lot of films I'll watch with my wife and I'll tell her it's one of my favorite films of all time. And halfway through, I'll look at her and go, damn, that movie's not very good. We'll do a whole list of those. But watching Armageddon, now I'm watching it on plasma. And it's amazing how beautiful that image is in 1080p. How the black level of plasma is still absolutely gorgeous. And watching 1080p in native 1080p is amazing. Now, the reason why I also want to cover this movie is it's available on HBO. A lot of you already own it. And it's only a couple dollars to rent on Amazon if you've never seen it. Many of you guys are younger, you haven't seen it. 1998 now is so long ago. It's painfully long ago, actually. I was 24 years old when this movie came out. Now, talking about the film and reflecting on it, the reason I also want to reflect on it, talking about nostalgia, is sometimes the movies aren't as good as you remember. Sometimes they're actually better than you remember. But what they basically do is, like music, you're thinking of who you were with, what was happening in your life when that film was happening. For me, I was watching that film in June 1998 with my best friend, somebody I grew up with, who passed away in September of 1998. Shout out to Brian. He was my very first friend. You'll see a picture of him on the screen. We're watching that movie together. And as we're sitting in the theater, it was just two of us. And even though we grew up together, he still wanted to sit 2 seats away. He was a big guy, football player. And we're watching that film and just focused on the movie. Remember, there's no phones at that time. And as the movie gets some sad parts in it, which makes this film unique, is I'm getting choked up. I'm not looking at him. I'm just like trying to hold back a little bit of tears coming on. And one of the scenes towards the very end when he's talking to his daughter, now neither one of us are parents at this time. We're in our early 20s. I glance over at him and his face is shining with tears. Now, he was an absolute monster and he was a big guy. And he's just looking up at the screen and his face is wet with tears. And he looks over at me. He goes, "What the F are you looking at?" I just looked back at the screen And literally, I hung in there for the rest of the movie until the very end when the wedding scene comes on. And then I felt like that, that little tear come down. Anyway, special shout out to my friend Brian. He's been gone a very long time. He was my very first best friend. Not to start, we grew up together. Not to start this video in a somber note, but just trying to show you the power of film and the memories that we share with these films. Also in this video and on this channel, your responses in the comments mean the world to me. Make them long, make them, as long as they're not toxic. I really want to know what you think. I really want to hear how you feel, especially with something like film. Tell me where you were. Tell me you've seen it. Tell me you haven't seen it. Tell me you hated it. Just let me know what you're thinking. Armageddon, Michael Bay. Now, nostalgia works the other way. Michael Bay, to me, was, I'll be careful here, I began to really dislike him. I am a Generation 1 Transformers fan. And other than halfway through the first Transformers film, I actually hate those movies. Out of 700 videos that I have on this channel, you'll very rarely hear the word hate. I despise those films. I don't find them funny. I dislike them very much. I love that universe, and I hate what was done with that universe. And I'll be using the word formulaic a lot. A lot of films now, the obtrusive amount of comedy and slapstick that is thrown into films. I understand certain films like Deadpool are supposed to be that way. And in that context, that works. In other films, it doesn't. And Michael Bay's been known for explosion upon explosion upon explosion. I don't love all his films, but Armageddon is definitely a special film. Now, having a movie like Deep Impact come out around the same time, this happened a lot through history with Braveheart and Rob Roy and certain films that are so similar that come out at the same time. Armageddon was a complete surprise. Now, there was also trailers back then, nowhere near as much as there are now as far as giving you the entire film. I had no idea how emotional that film was going to be. No idea how it would impact me watching that film, other than seeing it with my best friend. And that being a sad movie for me a few years later, I stayed away from that film. And here's a reason I did, is I began to dislike the cast. I began to dislike Bruce Willis the more I read about him. This is where the media and hearing too much about your favorite actors starts to affect you watching them in roles, at least with me. Now, for you, it might not be that case. I began to get very sick of Bruce Willis, who I loved since Moonlighting days. Hearing more about how he was as a person at the time was harder to get disbelief in him being a good father, good person. Ben Affleck, I liked him a great deal in this film. He was just a young actor at the time. Seeing him later, I began to dislike him. And other actors that I just got so played out and so tired of seeing that I began to stay away from films like this. Now, that's just me. That's how I feel. If I find out a singer or whatever is a total scumbag or whatever, I tend not to want to listen to that music anymore or watch those films. That's just me, but that's just me sharing my connection to the film. So I'm injured. I'm in the house just like you guys are. And Armageddon's there. I haven't seen it in a long time. I have the Blu-ray. It's not a movie I pop in very often. And again, Michael Bay has soured for me. Going in and watching this film, I was blown away all over again. Now, I've given you two sides of nostalgia. Giving you the side of my friends and the time I was in, and also the negative impacts of formulaic filmmaking and the same kind of thing, explosions, everything else. Kind of forgetting about Armageddon and the emotional aspect of it. Not to mention the world building that is left out of so many films today. I'll use an example as far as like Jurassic World. Chris Pratt and everything. I began to get sick of this unbelievable action, this action star mentality. Now, Armageddon is full of action set pieces, full of them. Craziness. There are going to be spoilers in this. Craziness, explosions galore. That's Michael Bay to the core. But there is a regular guy aspect to it that is kind of lost. In films now, everybody becomes an action star 5 seconds into the film. The comedy that is in a lot of today's films is inappropriate. Not inappropriate in its subject matter, but in its timing. They'll have slapstick comedy in something like Stranger Things, while there's an alien invasion and people are dying outside the door. Stranger Things, the first season was like survival horror science fiction. By the time you get to the third season, it's slapstick. I know I'm fading away from Armageddon, but I'll get back to it. The world building in Armageddon, the oil rig, the cast, it reminds me very much of Alien. You only see a little bit of the cast. Michael Clark Duncan, you know, rest in peace. Amazing and teddy bear, but gigantic guy. You really feel like this group of guys, Steve Buscemi, this group of guys work together on that rig. You do really feel that Ben Affleck is the hotshot guy who grew up there. And him dating Liv Tyler, who again is beautiful and was in many movies back then, but she was realistically beautiful. She looked like a real person. She looked like a natural, real person. Strong, intelligent, female character, but realistic. She's not doing backflips and all this crazy stuff, but she's there. It's a very diverse cast, but diverse organically. You had all kinds of nationalities there. You had Owen Wilson was in there when he was young, before he went into Wedding Crashers and kind of went really over the top. Steve Buscemi, as I mentioned, you do feel like these guys work together. Bruce Willis's accent's a little bit off, but him as a loving father, as a distant father, I don't have to see the entire backstory. I don't have to know what happened to his wife to really get involved in that story. That is basic world building that is left out of so many films. When every death in this film happens, you feel it. And I could care less about many of the characters in today's films. Today's films are either like video games, you know, huge blockbuster sequel reboots, or they're really small independent films. Something like Parasite, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong, but there used to be this middle ground where you would have so many good films that would never get made today. Armageddon wouldn't be made today. You can't make that without it being based on a comic book or a movie. Going back and watching that, watching these characters that I had never seen before and falling in love with them individually. Seeing how the dude's getting a tattoo with his mom. They're criminals. You know, again, Owen Wilson, these other characters. As they showed that world building, as they're putting that team together, it was something that I fell in love with, and I felt like I was there. The time was flying by. I was never bored, even in the world building aspect. The beginning of it with all the effects and the asteroids hitting was something you saw a ton in the 90s, but the effects actually stand up. A lot of practical effects that were there still look amazing to this day. A 4K Blu-ray would look a lot like Pacific Rim, I think, with its lighting. A gorgeous film, excellent sound. Love watching this movie. Now, getting back into the film, Billy Bob Thornton in this film. Watching him then, seeing him then, Sling Blade, Tombstone. He wasn't him yet. He wasn't Angelina Jolie. Do you follow me when we get into the media? I didn't know a lot about him. I didn't care to. Jason Isaacs, one of my favorite actors. He was in The Patriot. He was in Event Horizon. He was in so many things. And to see him in the supporting role here as one of the smartest scientists, a lot of that just grabbed me. Not everybody was overly attractive. There's no reason that everybody should be a model. Everybody should be beautiful. Now, we all love beautiful people, don't get me wrong, but it just takes me out of it. There's no reason to have a young, beautiful guy or girl in those roles. Jason Isaacs looks like a regular guy. Michael Clark Duncan is not The Rock. He doesn't need to be. He's just a big, jacked, fun, warm guy. He's not ripped. He's not The Rock, who is in everything. We'll cover The Rock some other time, but it doesn't need to be these action heroes. They were realistic in the sense that they all had their place. And throughout the film, they all did heroic things, but not so crazy. There was no crazy fight scenes. The world building reminded me a little bit of Heat, where you had a little bit of every character. You had his second in command, his name escapes me, but he had the gambling issue. You can tell that he wasn't a great dad. And all you needed was that little excerpt of time. Buscemi had a little bit of a gambling problem and, you know, had a problem with strippers. Michael Clark Duncan, again, that warm, strong guy. But when you see them on that rig together, you feel like they actually work together. I watch something like Prometheus, and I don't believe that team even knows each other. So that kind of world building is such an immersive way to build that world. Even when they connect with NASA, seeing the guys that work there, seeing their ideas. There was comedy there, but it was at the appropriate time. And it wasn't slapstick. It was the way they would be funny at a work environment, if you've ever been in a corporate environment. And then Keith David, who was amazing in everything, playing the Colonel. I mean, it was a great, great cast. As they catch up with the guy from Heat, what's his name? I'm actually going to take some notes here. Jason Fichtner, who was in Dark Knight. He was in a million other films. You saw him. He was in The Banker in Dark Knight. Phenomenal as the Air Force pilot. Again, Jason Isaacs was great. Having these guys all through this film before they were really famous is what's so amazing by going back and watching these films. But so believable in the action. So believable. Love this movie. That was all before they even went onto the asteroid. Shows them training. Shows them have a certain amount of time. They only have 18 days. Showing them train. Showing them fail. That's the story arc that Rey never got in Star Wars. Show me them struggle. Show me them fail when they're oil drilling and they snap the drills and the transmissions. You're giving me a look into Ben Affleck being, very reckless, and how that'll either pay off or hurt them later on. Getting them to train, that world building, then showing them go back into their own world gives me more of their development. That when the very first death happens, it does hurt you. They end up at the Russian space station with the actor, what's his name? Let's find him. Peter Stormare, who has been in everything. He's also been in another underrated film. Where am I losing my track? Keanu. One of my favorite movies. But he's been in a million things. He's actually in the game I'm playing upstairs now. But he was such a good actor. He was in that as the Russian. Again, he was in there with some comedy relief, but not so over the top that I'm like rolling my eyes. I'm not saying, Jesus. It can't take you out. And a lot of immersion in these films yanks you out. Comedy. Overly sexual jokes that make no sense in a lot of today's films that they throw in. Politics. Agendas all crammed into the films that we love with no world building. Armageddon built that world. The action was appropriate. Now, was it over the top? Yes. But in the very first death, where that the space shuttle, the second one, crashes, when they're getting into the basement or the lower cargo deck, and you see the bodies of the pilots hit the front of the glass, you felt that. I felt that. I felt that watching that again. Right away, I don't know who that was. At the pilot, there was loss. There was also some fake out deaths. But you're worried about every character. Someone like Owen Wilson, who you didn't really know back then, but he was in Behind Enemy Lines, he was in a lot of films, but you're saying to yourself, I can't wait to see what this guy does. They had the Han and Chewie joke earlier on. You can see that they had a relationship. They were, Bruce Willis's character mentions that he's almost the same age as his daughter. And there's that, hey man, you guys are all young. You convey that with so little. Like Heat, like I mentioned before, a little excerpt of all of their lives gives me a feeling of who they are. And it's so important to have that. The action on the ship, the first ship goes down. There are some very, very far-fetched effects, obviously, and there's far-fetched action. It is an action film. But the emotion in it, many of them die. They don't just go on without paying respect to the character that just lost. In so many other films, somebody dies, like, forget it. It's unrealistic. So even in a film that is unrealistic, the science doesn't match up. This film is so heartfelt. It's appropriate, funny. Buscemi. These are things that comedy you would do in the real workplace, especially if something's going wrong. It wouldn't be slapstick. Now, the film has decent writing. The characters, again, are very fleshed out. Comedy in there, appropriate. The action, it looks phenomenal. The effects are phenomenal. Again, it's Michael Bay. Explosions galore. But the emotion, the connection between all of them, they don't get along. They don't see eye to eye. You can tell Bruce Willis's character is headstrong. He's not always right. Ben Affleck's character, there's a struggle there. And it is something that as the movie gets to its climax, it gets to the end of it, that you do feel that loss. You do feel they have that love for each other. The movie probably has, if anything for me, any flaws, is there's not way too many. There's probably 2 or 3 times where things go wrong that probably take you out of the immersion. For an example, at the very end, when they're saying goodbye and he's saying goodbye to his daughter, something else goes wrong yet again, which relies on the 2 characters go down and get things working out. That was probably one step too far, because at a certain point, I think it becomes laborious to watch the characters fail and fail and fail. It just gets to be exhausting. So probably 1 or 2 many times of that, but also seeing the dynamic, how at NASA, they're growing their bond to try to help them. Keith David, all these characters, the government, we've seen that in many films, but I think it's done very, very well here. Again, the action is heart-pounding. You're hoping after they kill some characters in the beginning not to lose any more, and you do still lose them towards the end. Not everybody makes it. The emotion between father and daughter. Being a father hits me now more, but as a young guy, it did hit me back then, and I really, really do appreciate that emotion that's in this film that's not in a lot of films back then or today. The music, but the design, the set design, the asteroid is believable. The explosions are a ton of them, but the effects do stand up. A lot of the effects in the 90s didn't. Even in the mid-2000s, a lot of the CG did not match. This film looks flawless to me. I love it. I love the sound effects. It's a gorgeous movie. I want you guys to check it out. I want you to check it out either for the first time and let me know what you think about it. This video is going to be very long. That's okay. Obviously, I'm not afraid to talk. But I thought the film was so well done, especially for a Michael Bay film. Conveying the emotion, conveying loss, having those characters, even ones like Michael Clark Duncan, who was such a big, strong guy, they had love for each other. You believe they worked together. And a lot of the films that I'm going to cover, that's going to be the common denominator, is the world building, the cast. It looks like these guys knew each other. And if you've ever worked with a bunch of guys or a bunch of girls, you've had lunch together, you know that brother-sister rivalry and those brothers, and there's just a camaraderie there that comes out in this film that is really lost in today's films. They don't spend enough time with an arc, how these guys get better. The Buscemi thing at the end was a little crazy as he starts to lose his mind, but it's still a great role. Seeing the Colonel and Bruce Willis disagree, it's not forgotten. You can see they have strife. You can see where they have respect and lose respect and gain respect. That tug of war of emotion really does add to the payoff at the end of the film. And having an ending, a complete ending. There's no sequel, a happy ending. It's a complete film. Towards the end, literally choking back the tears, which I'm not afraid to admit. Seeing my best friend cry his eyes out, and then at the end with Aerosmith's music during the wedding was an amazing way to complete this film. I loved Armageddon. Please go back and watch it. I have no problem talking up here for 20, 30 minutes about something I'm passionate about. I'm not a film buff, I'm a movie guy. So a lot of the classic films, I'm more of a movie person. And to have a film like this that I avoided because it looked, at least nostalgia-wise, a throwaway action film, which there were many at that time that I appreciate, I would kill for a film like this now. Because now films have, again, no arc. You have a lot of forced agendas and politics thrown into films. I'm not political at all, but when I see them in films, it's not about my beliefs. It yanks me out. I can see what you're doing here. I don't want to see the creases. Let me believe your world. I want to see that world. That film, to me, is nearly perfect. It is a popcorn movie. It's an action movie. It's one of my all-time favorites. In 1998, where were you? Did you like that film? But for me, seeing those actors, now I've gotten to, for me, my beliefs have changed. I could care less what actors and singers do in their free time. I've learned in the last few years to totally separate that and just enjoy. I don't read gossip stuff, but I learned to go back and enjoy Bruce Willis for who he was, or Mel Gibson in Braveheart. I've gone back and just been able to delineate how I feel about them or what I read about them. Love this movie. Tender film, funny movie, tons of action. We need it in 4K. We need it in Atmos. 25 minutes in, and this is just part one of this series where we're focusing on movies. Please put in the comments, not only have you seen this movie, how this movie made you feel, but also what movies you want to see. Circling back to the beginning, the character building, the time and love it took initially to show me this cast, to show me how they interacted with each other. Liv Tyler, the emotion, Billy Bob Thornton and Liv Tyler, the little tiny parts where Billy Bob Thornton's character said he wishes he had the patch. You know, later on he tears the patch off and he gives it to Ben Affleck. That's organic. When I watch movies now, I'm like, oh, that's obvious. That's going to be this later. This film was so good at that, and it's Michael Bay. It was so good, where even Bruce Willis's character wasn't this over-the-top action star. Even their fights, their action pieces, where he wasn't doing backflips and doing anything crazy. There was a little skirmish. He didn't turn into an amazing fighter or anything. It was all, the characters were all able to operate within their real skill sets. Nothing was so over the top that it was unbelievable, other than them flying across the chasm with the armadillo. That stuff is outlandish. The movie is far-fetched, but the character building is top-notch. The comedy, the effects, the beauty of the film, and more importantly, guys, the arc. Do you care about these characters? Do you love these characters? To me, that's all that matters. It doesn't have to be a sad movie or a real film. It just has to be characters that I love and characters that I miss the minute they're gone. Every death is felt. Even the characters, like one of the pilots that dies at the end, they acknowledge that he died. He didn't just disappear. And then at the wedding at the end, you see all their pictures. That is the best way to pay tribute to the characters that passed. 26 minutes in, I am Brian at Whisper Status 74. Thank you for joining me today. I'm thinking of all of you guys. Check out Armageddon. Either watch it on HBO, rent it, dig it up if you have it on DVD. But I hope everybody is doing well. I'm thinking about you guys. I will be live streaming every couple days just to talk to you guys individually. I don't care if a couple of you jump in. It doesn't matter. I'm thinking about you. You guys mean the world to me. I hope everybody is doing okay and everybody is safe. I hope everybody in your families is safe. And I hope you guys are being careful and letting the tech that we already have versus buying so much. We're going to cover this in the next tech therapy video. Let the stuff that you already have serve you. Let the movies, the games, I'll be showing you older games that I played. Go back to that stuff and let that serve you. You paid the money for it. Enjoy the TV you have. Go back to some of these older films and enjoy them. And I'm going to cover many more films. Put in the comments what you think about this film, this video. Please like and subscribe. And also let me know what films you want me to cover. All right, guys. Take care. Love you guys. I'll talk to you soon.